In this lesson, we'll be going over adding text frames, selecting text, doing some basic edits. We go into text a lot more in detail in the lookbook project, but we do need to add some text to this project as well. So I'm just going to scroll down here a little bit because we want to add some text right here. So we can either use this over here to scroll around or click these arrows. You can also press the space bar and click and drag, and that's a shortcut if you have any of these selected, except for example the type tool. If I press space, it won't work. In that case, I would have to press Alt space bar and click and drag, and then it will toggle into the move tool. So for this example, we're going to be using the type tool. It's just right there on the tools panel. You can also press T on the keyboard to select it as a shortcut. And to add a new text frame, we just click and drag. So I'm going to click and drag so it goes from one margin to the other. Just so you know, these will not print. That purple line there, that's just the margin telling us that we don't want vital text outside of that, really way close to the edge, in case the printer cuts the paper right there instead of right there, for example. So now we have a text frame. I can use the selection tool, the black arrow there, and click and drag and move it around just like as if it was a placed photo. I can click and drag the corner like that and resize it, and also click and drag the edges to resize it as well. So I'm going to click and drag it to the margin there, and I have it selected here, but I can't type anything in yet. What I can do, actually, a shortcut with the selection tool, is double click on it, and then now it has automatically selected the type tool, and I can type in some text. I can press escape key on the keyboard, and that will toggle back to the selection tool that we had selected earlier. So I'm going to double click in there. I'm just going to type in lunch special in all caps, and we're going to make that a lot larger in a second. I just want to show you another way to add a text frame. We can actually just create, for example, a rectangle with the rectangle frame tool, click and drag out, and usually we're placing photos into this and graphics. But if we have the type tool and I hover over it, notice it adds that circular part of the icon there, and if I hover over here, it does not have that. That's telling me that if I click here, it's going to embed that text in that frame. So if I click it, it converts it to a text frame. So I could type some text in there. So I'm going to use the selection tool there and select it and press delete. I'm going to show you how we can actually click and drag over it without it doing that. One option would be to use the type tool and just click and drag. That creates a text frame on top of it. So then those are two separate objects. So if we wanted to add a background color, we would add a fill to that, which we'll be going over later. And then we have the type tool in its own text frame. It's a separate object. Another way to avoid having the type tool embed in another object like that is to go to your preference panel. So edit, preferences, then type. And again, on Mac, you'll click on InDesign, preferences, then type. And then here where it says type tool converts frames to text frames, if I uncheck that, then it will not have that effect of if we hover over and just click on a frame, it will convert it to a text frame. So I like the default where we can do that, so I'm going to keep that checked. Now let's go ahead and I'm going to move this graphic frame over to the side for a second, off onto the pasteboard there. Instead of clicking, dragging a new text frame out with the type tool, there's another way to bring text in. That's just going to File, Place, and then in the support files, go to Text. So it's InDesign support files, poster, then text. And then Coffee Cafe, which is kind of a generic name for this project, so it's not trademarked or anything. Go ahead and uncheck Replace Selected Item just in case we had something selected. That's best practices to not have that checked unless we want to replace something with a photo. Go ahead and press Open, and now we can see that it has a preview of the beginning of this text from the Word document. So I could just click and let go, and it will place it in here in the margins there. So I'm going to press Control Z or Command Z on the Mac, and I could also click and drag, and that would place it in that specific area. And I can also hover this graphic frame over here and just click, and it converts it to a text frame as well. Now if we had columns, we'll be going over text formatting a lot more advanced later, as well as margins and columns, but let's just say we had columns here. We could just go to Layout, Margins and Columns. I'll just do 4 columns like that. And if I click here, it will flow that just in that column. So I'm going to press Control Z to undo a little bit. So for this example, I'm just going to click and drag until it's right in the middle. The smart guides will help us out here. And I'm just going to have it right there for now. We can always move it later. That's one of the really cool things about InDesign is we can move these text frames around, edit the text, adjust them, and it's very versatile. Now, again, if I want to edit this text, I can double click in here and it will toggle to the type tool. But I can also double click just one word and it will select the entire word very quickly. I can also triple click and it will select that entire line. And if I quadruple click, it'll select the entire paragraph. And if I click 5 times in a row, it will select the entire text frame there. All the text in the text frame. What I like to do is press Control A on the PC or Command A on the Mac whenever the cursor is blinking inside the text frame, and that will select all the text as well. If we had to make some changes to all the text. We can also click somewhere, say right here, and then hold Shift and then click somewhere else and it will select all the text in between. Just make sure we have the cursor blinking in there when we press Control A. If we don't have that, if we just press Control A when it's just selected like an object, it'll actually select everything on the page. If we ever want to deselect, I just click in the background here with the selection tool, or we can press Control Shift A on the PC or Command Shift A on the Mac, and that's a helpful shortcut for deselecting. So we have some text so far, some place text as well as some typed text. We're going to do some basic edits in the next lesson. Thanks.